discussion.
Luke chapter 12 and verse 35 is where we're going to start. And there are several interesting things in this section. I had two parables set aside, and I got into this one and thought, well, we'll just talk about this one by itself. And we'll look at it in little sections and try to make applications from each little section. But there's a lot of neat stuff in here. Anyway, Luke 12:35. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Okay, so that's a fairly understandable. You put that over into Christianity. Maybe we think about the second coming. People need to be ready when Jesus comes back. Maybe he's talking about ongoing opportunities. Whenever there's something presents itself to you, when the master has a job for you to do and you're ready to do it, then maybe that's what he's talking about. But the thing I found interesting in that little section is how similar that is to a parable he tells in the last week of his life about 10 virgins. And the 10 virgins are waiting on the bridegroom to come by so they can join this parade to go over and get the bride and bring her back to the groom's house for the big party. So this is a picture of the end of that procession. He's already got his bride. He comes back and he gets back to the house. And the servants should be ready and waiting, dressed and ready for service when he gets back and finds them watching for him. So it'll be good for you if you're waiting and watching when he comes back. But the next little section is even maybe stranger. It says, truly I tell you, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak. So sometimes these processions to go get the bride would take longer than you might imagine. You remember in the parable of the 10 virgins, they're waiting and it's after midnight, and then finally they hear the shout that the bridegroom is coming. So he's not home yet. He's just passing by, and wherever these ladies are waiting on him, they're going to join the procession, still have to go on to the house. So it's going to be after midnight before he shows up back at the house. But this idea that he would dress himself to serve, have the servants recline at the table, and wait on them. Does that sound similar, familiar to anything we've talked about on Sunday mornings lately? In John, maybe John chapter 13. Jesus took off his outer garment and he put on a towel. He began to wash their feet, going one by one by one. That's the only time in Jesus' life that I see him physically dressing the part of a servant and serving the ones who should be his servants. The disciples are the followers. They're the workers. He's the master. In fact, when he gets finished washing their feet, he says, you call me master and Lord, and that's right, because that's who I am. But if I can do this for you, then you ought to be able to do it for each other. But this may just all circle around special occasions, wedding feasts. Maybe the groom had special responsibilities or special things he did during the time of the feast that were unusual, things that he wouldn't normally do. Think about when Jesus went to the wedding at Cana of Galilee, and you've got all these people there, and they run out of wine, and Mary comes and gets Jesus and said they've run out of wine, and Jesus says, well, that's not my problem. Mary says, well, you just do whatever he tells you to do. So Jesus tells the servants to go get the big pots and fill them up with water, and he makes about 150 gallons of wine to further this wedding. So the servants are doing exactly what the servants are supposed to be doing, and they're some of the only ones that know what just happened, right? The people at the feast don't know. The master of the feast doesn't know. The groom doesn't have any idea. Jesus does something that's so amazing, but very kind of in the back room, secretive. But the servants know what's going on. So anyway, you and I don't think much about masters and servants in our generation. Not very many of our families ever had people that were servants that lived at the house and worked for us, and people that were expected to be ready all hours of the day and night to wait on us, to do different things. As a kid in Tennessee, I knew a woman that was a servant. She didn't live with the family all the time, but she was there just about every time I was, and was kind of an extra member of the family. So all of us knew her, and all of us knew what to expect from her, and we all knew to behave around her because she had the authority of the parents. But she wasn't family, but she was like family as a servant. But anyway, most of us don't have much to do in those kind of things. I had a question about Paul and Luke in particular. Luke's the writer of this gospel. So he mentions that Jesus talks about the master coming in the middle of the night. He talks about the master changing clothes and taking care of the servants. Did Paul know about that occasion when Jesus washed their feet? He wasn't there. Jesus might have told him when he was educating him in the Arabian desert. Maybe the Holy Spirit filled in the blanks for Luke. Luke says in the beginning of his gospel that he did a lot of research because he wanted to make sure that the things he was sharing were accurate. So maybe he ran across that event when he was talking to folks as he was writing his gospel, but he doesn't include it. There's no foot washing in Luke's gospel. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about the Lord's Supper being instituted. They don't talk about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. So again, this is the only place I know of where you have a discussion of the master changing clothes and taking care of the disciples. There's one passage where he says, let's say you're a servant and you've worked all day and the master comes home. Will he then give you something to eat? No. It's time for you to make sure that he has something to eat, and after he's taken care of, then you can think about getting yourself something to eat. So Jesus, he keeps that social order most of the time, that the master is the master and the servant is the servant. But here he talks about a master taking care of the servants at the feast, and then of course when he washes the disciples' feet. So anyway, I found all of that kind of interesting. Verse 39. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So we're familiar with this genre, right? The idea that the second coming, Jesus' return, judgment, comes like a thief in the night. But how do we get from the man getting back the middle of the night or even toward daybreak, changing clothes and taking care of his servants, to if he had known when the thief was coming, he would have been ready? I mean, we just kind of jump parables. We jump metaphors here to talk about something different. If the owner of the house had known what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into.
Both of them are talking about timing.
Okay, about timing.
Yeah, you're both of them, you're having to wait because you don't know, so you've got to be ready.
Okay. So waiting on important things, being ready when those important things finally arrive. Okay, that's a good connection. Peter's going to ask a question in just a minute, and it makes me wonder if this is the catalyst, how he kind of changed into this discussion of coming as a thief in the night. But Jesus coming is compared several times to a thief in the night, and I've brought down just a few, and you can try to turn real fast if you want to, otherwise I'll just read them to you. Matthew 24, he says, "Watch therefore, you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. Know this, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready. The Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So we have a little bit different wording, but almost the same point being made. Be sure, because you don't know when the Son of Man is coming. The Son of Man will come at an hour when you don't expect him, Luke says. 1 Thessalonians 5, he says, you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. I have a think so. I think Paul was talking about 70 AD and the invasion of Rome. The Christians had been schooled. They knew that they were supposed to get out of town when they saw these things begin to happen, and many of them did escape and did not die in the massacre at Jerusalem. 2 Peter 3, the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. So that's a lot more second coming kind of passage, the end of time. Revelation chapter 3, he says, remember how you have received and what you have heard, hold fast to it and repent. Therefore, if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know what hour I am coming upon you. So Revelation 3 is in the middle of those letters. So that's Jesus talking to one of the 7 churches of Asia and saying, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to show up like a thief in the night. Paul tells the Thessalonians, you guys shouldn't think about Jesus coming as a thief in the night, because you know that Jesus is coming and you're preparing yourself. So prepared Christians, happy occasion when the Master gets back. Unprepared Christians, not a happy occasion when the Lord gets back. So here's Peter's question. Right? Peter says, Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? So I think the last few weeks, Sunday morning class, we've been asking that question over and over. To whom is Jesus talking? And so Peter here is confused enough by what Jesus is saying about the master and the servants and Jesus coming as a thief in the night and all that he says, well, are you talking to us, or is this parable for everybody? It would have been very easy for Jesus to answer the question, right? It's an A or B question. Are you talking to us or to everyone? And Jesus could have said, you, or he could have said, everyone. No, there's another paragraph of Jesus telling another story, weaving another metaphor. I think Peter got the point. I hope he did. Verse 42, the Lord answered, who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. So lots of parables that you see Jesus talk about. The master goes away and he leaves people in charge of things. He comes back and says, well, what did you do with what I left you with? Well, you gave me 5 talents and here's 5 more. Oh, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. You were faithful with a little bit. I'm going to give you responsibility over a lot. Okay? Does that answer the question? Are you talking to us? Or are you talking to everybody? Well, it'll be good if the person to whom I give this responsibility is doing what they're supposed to do when I come back. So again, not exactly an answer, but hopefully Peter understood what he was saying. It would be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so. He will put him in charge of all of his possessions. Verse 45, but suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming. And he then begins to beat the other servants, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, so thief in the night again, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. Okay? So are you talking to us? Or are you talking to everybody? Well, what if the master puts somebody in charge of something? Would it be good or bad if they're ready when he gets back? Would it be good or bad if they're not ready when he gets back? So hopefully Peter and the disciples came away from that with, okay, we understand you're giving us a big responsibility, and the other servants represent the other believers, and you want us to make sure they get fed. So all of the things fall nicely into place, but Jesus doesn't say, well, Peter, I'm telling you this, you're in charge, and you better get it done because I'm going to come back and check on you. We don't ever get that. We get another parable or another couple of parables. At the end, he says he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. So the parable of the talents, I believe the last one in line, here's what you gave me. I knew you were a harsh man, and you reaped where you didn't sow, and and I was afraid of you, so I hid it in the ground. And the master will say, depart from me, you wicked servant, and he'll take the 1 talent, and he'll give it to the one who has 10, and then he will cast that other guy out into outer darkness. And so the end result for somebody who doesn't serve is terrible. And Jesus tells Peter in answer to his question, what you want is to be faithful with the job that you're given to do. Verse 47 starts another little section. I wanted to go back with what Jesus said to Peter. He's given a job to feed people, right? The head servant, his job, at least in this passage, is to make sure that everybody else is taken care of. So think about Jesus' statements all through his ministry. If you want to be the most important one, then you've got to be the servant of everybody. So if you want to be the chief, you've got to learn to be the least. So Jesus says, here's the servant that's left in charge, and what he's supposed to do with his authority is make sure that everybody else is taken care of. But if the master takes too long coming back, that servant's mindset shifts, and he installs himself as the new master. So now he's in charge of everything, and he's going to do what he wants to do. And he beats people, and he lives a sloven kind of life, overeating and drinking to excess. And Jesus says, well, when the master comes back, what's he going to do with that guy? Right? He's going to treat him harshly because he treated other people harshly. And verse 47 follows that up, and we have levels of punishment, and that's what makes this last little section even more interesting. The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready or does not do what the master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much will be asked. So Peter says, are you talking to us, or are you talking to everybody? Well, if his answer is for Peter, then he's saying to Peter, if I give you a large portion of responsibility, if I give you a lot of authority, then I'm going to expect more from you. And then the people that are, the trickle downs, that don't know everything that you know, that don't have the authority that you have, that don't understand the mysteries that you understand, if they mess up, I'm going to have more mercy on them than I'm going to have on you, because you're the one that I'm leaving in charge. I'm putting you guys at the head of the line with the most responsibility and the most authority. So if you mess up, many stripes. But if they mess up, fewer stripes. So Jesus held his disciples' feet to the fire, so to speak, during his ministry. But I think looking from our angle, we can't imagine them ever being worthy of any kind of punishment. Right? Can you imagine what would it take for me to think that Peter needs to be punished. After Pentecost, when did he ever do anything that we know of that was, out of the way? Paul, the guys that wrote the Gospels, they're our heroes. We can't imagine them being punished. But in answer to the question, are you talking to us or are you talking to everybody? Jesus says, well, if it's the us, just know that the us has more responsibility and more authority, so the us is going to be treated more stringently in judgment than those who are not part of that group. I don't think this is just a general blanket statement that says, that there are levels of punishment or levels of ecstasy in heaven and hell. I think there are other passages that if you kind of tie this in with them, that maybe that's hinted at in Scripture from time to time. But it's hard to know, because it's hard to know what heaven is ultimately like. Hard to know how to, in our human minds, to figure what the punishment of hell would be like. How could it be that much better in heaven or that much worse in hell than just being in one place or the other? I don't know. I do have friends who believe very strongly that there are levels of punishment. And I have friends that believe there are levels of glory. That some people will have a better time of it in the heavenlies. They haven't proven it to me, but they have some interesting arguments. So, worth looking at, worth thinking about. We'll know one of these days. And hopefully we're faithful in everything that he gives us to do, so that when he gets back, he can look at us as a servant and say, you did a good job with the things I gave you to do.